I'm preparing a sort of long-form video on the horses of the Iberian Peninsula. While researching the late Reconquista, when the Catholic Ferdinand and Isabella completed the 700-year effort to remove the Muslim Moors from Spain, I began to realize that the Spanish cavalry were using two different fighting styles based on two different types of riding. This image is from a chair in Toledo, depicting the conquest of Marbel in 1485. The two riders show two different styles. The rider in front, King Fernando in La Brida, while the Moorish knight behind him is in La Gineta. La Brida, the long stirrup position we are most familiar with when looking at medieval and Renaissance cavalry or jousting knights on their heavy horses, and the style La Jineta, a shorter stirrup with a faster, lightly armored, hurry and harass type fighting style. La Brida style's name comes from the Spanish word bride, meaning bridle or curb bit. Like all things in riding, the form and function are related. The rider's position was designed to be able to give or receive a shock. Fighting was done with heavy lances, at least until the lance was dropped or broken. Fighting would then be with sword or other smaller weapon, and hopefully, the knight would remain mounted. The fighting style was organized and depended on a cohesive unit that trained and practiced together. I'm using descriptions of the riding styles by reading an English translation of Livro da Ensinança de Bem Cavalgar toda Sela, or the title can be translated into the Book of the Art of Riding with Any Type of Saddle. Written around 1437-1438, this is one of the earliest known European works on equitation. The first riding book that we know of since Xenophon in 355 BC. Dom Duarte, King of Portugal, composed it not merely to instruct, but to elevate the rider's mind and body in harmony with the horse. He felt that there were 5 riding saddles or styles, and that a good horseman should be familiar, if not competent, in all ways of riding. He describes the Bravante saddle, deep with rider, as I described earlier, with stirrups in front. He stresses that the rider should be firm on the stirrups, in the saddle, and in the rider's vertical position. He can slightly stand to brace against the pommel or cantle as needed to take or give shock through the lance. The other La Brida position he describes is with the stirrups under, without the rider quite sitting. The rider maintains an absolutely vertical position as if standing on the ground. He feels that it is proper to tie the stirrups together under the horse's belly, so the rider is standing on a stable as possible platform. The rider does not quite sit, but stand and uses pommel and cantle as a balancing aid. He states that this is an older style of La Brida position, suitable in tournaments and jousts. He describes 2 La Gineta styles. Gineta means rider-warrior and originates in the North African word Zenita, which means a tribe of bold riders. There is a related word with a J, rather than G, is genet, and can be used to describe a horse with good breeding, light conformation, light and well-trained. One style he describes with the legs slightly flexed, upper body straight, but without much attention, as he states it, to the weight on the stirrups. The 2 La Brida styles had great emphasis on the consistent, steady weight on the stirrups. The other Gineta style he describes uses a Gineta saddle and rider stays erect in the upper body, but has shorter stirrups with a bent leg. The rider maintains contact with the stirrup with heel down and can even stand on the stirrups to lighten the seat when appropriate. He feels that a rider who remains erect in a Gineta saddle is unmatched in elegance compared to the other styles. The 5th way of riding is no saddle or stirrups. The Gineta style has blended over time with La Brida to be the style of the dressage rider. The Gineta riding style, of course, lends itself to a completely different fighting style and, of necessity, a different kind of horse. The style was brought to the Iberian Peninsula by the Moors, who fought with no armor and very fast attack and retreat style, with javelins that could be thrown with great lethality. The ancient Iberian riders, before the stirrup was introduced, were noted to ride with bent knees and raised legs, so they were ready to adapt to the style when stirrup use arrived. Iberian horses were supple and very light. The Gineta training style had very rapid gallops and turns, sudden halts and reinbacks. The La Brida training that we can see in the books after Dom Duarte have much of the same training methods, but the Iberian light cavalry style presented more like a duel than the La Brida horsemanship in formation on their larger horses. The La Brida style, with its long stirrups and deep seat, was designed for shock combat. Knights would form up in ranks or wedges or in a convoy, a unit of 5 to 10 riders. The horses were trained for straight-line charges, maintaining cohesion. You can see why the game of jousting was training for horse and rider. The goal was to deliver a devastating impact that could break enemy lines. Of course, the enemy had the same strategy. The charge would begin at a trot and build into a controlled gallop. Lances were couched under the arm and aimed at enemy shields or torsos. The La Brida seat gave stability and leverage for the upcoming shock. If the charge broke the enemy, knights would wheel around and pursue. If not, they'd draw swords or maces and engage in close combat or melee. In this series, we have a history of tournaments which show images of melees with a bunch of mounted knights in an enclosed space like town square, where all engaged in mounted combat. If the enemy held, they might withdraw and attack again. This strategy was ideal for battle in rather open fields and mass engagements, not as effective in rough terrain or skirmishes. It relied on discipline, training, and morale. It makes it easy to imagine how the mindset of the honor-bound, never say no, knight developed over the centuries. On the other hand, La Gineta combat style was characterized by its mobility and tactical flexibility. Their use was dependent on speed. Hit and run attacks or harassment operations, run in, throw 25 javelins, and run away. Good on rough terrain and in skirmish warfare, which favored quick disengagement. The weapons were light lances or javelins, short swords, and light shields known as adargas. Unlike the tight unit formation of the Brida charging forces, these would be small unit tactics with loose formations and flexible grouping that allowed swift approaches, feigned retreats, and multiple passes. The superior mobility could harass and exhaust an enemy too, or even help in flank protection of the heavy cavalry. This brings us to a point by the late Conquista. The 15th century Iberian commanders had learned to combine heavy and light cavalry in complementary roles. The heavy cavalry would be used for frontal assaults and decisive charges with armor, lances, swords, and large destrier. They would break the enemy lines or defend key positions and be used to support infantry. They embodied the chivalric ideal of nobility, Christianity, and martial virtue. The light cavalry would be used for reconnaissance, screening movements, or harassing skirmishes, as mentioned, but combined. They could be used to assist each other. For example, the light cavalry could scout, screen, and harass, while the heavy cavalry is held back in reserve. The light cavalry could draw the enemy out while the heavy cavalry delivers a decisive blow. Then the light cavalry could pursue retreating forces. Units were trained to coordinate these kinds of actions, and they understood each other's capabilities, which helped them maintain tactical flexibility. The Spanish armies under Ferdinand and Isabella' ability to combine these styles as no other European military had done to this point gave them considerable tactical advantages. Dom Duarte's emphasis on mastering both Brida and Gineta reflects this reality. While Brida brought the thunder, Gineta brought the dance. Together, they formed a complete martial vocabulary. Ferdinand and Isabella's hybrid army successfully ejected the Moors after 7 centuries, and they also defeated the French to take control of Naples a few years later, which we will discuss in an upcoming video on the Iberian horses.